Okay, so you are about to build a Teensybat detector. I think it's a very good choice. I had a lot of fun building the Teensybat detector and improving it. Okay, maybe you try to assemble your own kits or bought this partial kit from me. The partial kit contains a whole lot of components, including a box with a pre-milled front. Has the display, which is tested. That's why it's not in the closed package anymore. Okay, a whole bunch of parts, but not every part that is needed to build this is in this kit. Things that are not in the kit are like the Teensy audio board and the Teensy board itself, the Teensy 3.6. A battery. I like to build in a battery pack. I use these kind of power banks, and I just rip them apart to put them into the enclosure. They have a very nice lithium battery inside that could just fit into the black enclosure. So this is how you take it apart. Sorry for that big noise. And you can easily get out the battery cell and the circuit board. You can cut the circuit board off here and try and find the track here that has the plus 5 volts on it. The USB output is not needed. We can take off the power from the circuit board. Okay, so that is also not included. Not included is a coin cell battery and well, something like a power switch or something like that. Okay, so there were some questions about stacking these two boards, the Teensy board and the Teensy audio board. There is a small trick used here with these small resistors, just 1/8 watts resistors, so they are quite short. The trick to use these is for trying to eliminate the data noise. If you imagine a data signal like a square wave turning off and on, if the signal has to be high, hopefully we can see that here on the paper. If the signal does get high, there is quite a flow of current. It's very small, but there is quite a flow of current to rise the voltage to the high level. When it's reached the high level, the current is still flowing and it's kind of overshooting. So on each end you will get these nasty spikes that will make some noise, and we can hear that in our audio system. So it's not nice to hear this noise. For that reason we use the resistor, so the current cannot be too high. The result is that the data signal is not exactly a square wave, but it will have slopes turning on and off, but it's still working, and we have eliminated the noise. So that was the trick about the resistors. If you're looking at the assembly manual, you will see a diagram like this. This diagram shows where to put a regular header pin or another connection, just a simple wire, or where you should put a resistor. Okay, I heard people that had troubles placing the resistors, and well, it's nice to have someone with you, to have an extra hand that can help you, but if you are all by yourself it can still work. But you might use a little trick. Maybe you could use some ferro board or whatever to put the resistors in, but I think it's quite easy if you just place them one by one. We do not need both leads to be very long, so I shorten one end to just a few millimeters. And as you can see, we have the Teensy audio board, which we need to use later, and we have the Teensy board. They go together like this. So the audio connector and the micro USB connector are at the same end. And I found it worked best if we try to start soldering from the Teensy board. So I place all these resistors in the Teensy board first, and I like to start at this end. So not the very end. Number 32 pin has no resistor, but number 31 has. So I just put in the resistor and I solder it, and it will not be perfect the first time, but we can adjust it a little bit after. So I solder this one first. Okay, it should be in now. I do not want to be with my face on the camera. And then I push the pin upwards and heat it again. So now I have a resistor that is perfectly fit close to the board, and it's quite straight. If I'm not satisfied, I just heat it up again a little bit, and then we have the resistor in. So this should probably work better if you have someone with you that can help you. Another way you could try to do this is just by applying a little bit of solder in the hole where the resistor needs to go. Okay, there we have some. Hold the resistor over this hole, heat up the solder. Oh, I should have used some extra light. I have some. Okay, so I think that would be better for you guys to see. Heating up the solder, and just gently let the resistor fall in, and then next we need to heat it up again a little bit and make sure it is straight enough and it's just flush against the board with no space between it. So that's the two ways I think that are quite easy to use. Do not try to push through the whole wire, just clip off the end, a few millimeters off the end. You'll probably want to be clipping off the ends afterwards, but I think this would should work well enough. Okay, well, so we put it down. I always like to clean my soldering iron. I always use this, well, what is it, brass shavings or something like that. We solder the resistor. We do not mind if it's a bit out of alignment. You can probably see it's not exactly flush to the board, but we heat it up and we push it in, and so it will be straight enough to use like this. Okay, so there are a few resistors in here. I just picked another one, clipped off the end, and I'm gonna put it in. I'm not trying to have it exactly aligned, just trying to keep it in place long enough so I can solder it. Okay, cleaning the soldering iron and soldering this pin. Okay, so there it is, and you can see it's not quite aligned, but I heat it up again, push it in with my finger, and it's now touching the board, so the distance between the resistor and the board is as short as possible. I see this one can be heated up again to push in just a tiny bit more, and you can see they are fairly straight. Okay, so the other way we could do this is like this, just putting a little bit of solder in this hole. Okay, there it is. taking a resistor, clipping off the wire until about like 4 millimeters from the end, holding it over the hole that I just soldered shut, heating it up and pushing it in. Okay, and for the final touch I heat it up again and I push it in the last tenths of a millimeter, and you can see they're fairly straight right now. They have to be very straight if we want to put it in the board, but I have a small trick for that as well. So we solder them first all in the Teensy 3.6 board, and after that I will connect the whole thing to the audio board, but I will show you that later. I'm gonna first solder all the other pins. Alright, so we have all the resistors soldered in place, like we found them on the diagram, and now it's time to play a little trick. If we cut these pins, one end longer, the other end shorter, it will be much easier to find the right hole to put the pins of the resistors in. We have to put them through the audio board, and then after that we have to put them on the main board. So I always cut them one end longer than the other. I will cut them over a dustbin over here, so I will not get them all over the place. I like to use scissors for that. I could also use these small clippers, but these scissors work fine. Okay, so I hope you can see that the one end of the pins are a lot longer than the other end. Okay, and then we have to put that part here on the audio board. I always put in these pins first. I'm using headed pins because they have the right dimensions and I can solder them afterwards. This one I pushed one pin in, so we have this construction, and so we will not get the 3.3 volts from the Teensy connected to the 3.3 volts regulator that is on the main board. So I also put in that one. Can we see what 3 volts is? Here it says 3 volts, 3 or 3.3 volts. So it's on the far end, and only the furthest two are sticking out. The other one will not connect to the Teensy, and we need one here at the end, which is the ground connector. Okay, so now I have to try and put all this thing together. Just starting with the last pin of these rows. I hope it's in focus. It's a little bit hard to see on the camera, so I'll just start like this, and because of the different length of the pins, it should make it easier for me to get everything aligned. You do not have to straighten them quite perfectly. It takes a little bit of moving around. It seems that the header pins are the hard part. Come on, why are we doing this difficult? Okay, so you can see it's all together now. I'm gonna turn it over, put it down, and solder the whole thing together. Oh, I had the pins dropped out again. Okay, so this is also a little bit tricky. Oh yeah. Okay. I just wanted to say I should have brought my tweezers, but it just snaps in like this. Okay, so now we can solder this stuff together, and the trick here is to use a tiny amount of solder so we can get it very close to the main board. So that's more than enough to get it in place. Okay, checking how straight it is. It seems to be pointing upwards a little bit, so trying to push it down and solder it over again. Soldering this one and see how it looks. Ooh, it's even a bit more solder than I wanted to use, so cleaning the soldering iron will have it come out again. Okay, I should have soldered this end also. Just wanted to check if it's straight. It's straight enough for me. So I will solder some on this end, and I will solder then all the pins over to get everything connected together. But I will not waste your time on that. I'll just make sure the pins will not move before I solder all the last pins that are needed to get everything soldered together. This end you cannot reach after you mount it on the main board, so be sure you have all nice solder connections here on this end. I will continue, do all the last pins, and come back to you with the next step. Okay, so I soldered all my pins, all my resistors here on the board. Also the header pins that I was using are soldered into the board, and I also soldered the header pins on this end. I could have done it later because I want to solder them over all together, but because the soldering is not all that perfect, but it was good enough to hold all the resistors. So after I put this whole assembly onto the main board, I will go and solder them all over again. I failed to mention that there is a small jumper here on the bottom side of the Teensy, which you can cut if you want to separate the USB voltage, like if you want to have a built-in power bank or whatever without an extra connector. You can cut it and take the power from that pin over there. It's all very well described in the Teensy documents. I do not like to use that. I just build in an extra port for charging, so I do not cut the jumper. Not cutting the jumper also allows you to use this port for external power supply. If you did cut the jumper, you can always place a small jumper wire between the plus 5 volt pin and the USB voltage pin, so you can always restore the connection on the top side. It's no problem to do that. Okay, next I'd like to have all the components on the main board before we will put the assembly on, because this will allow us to have a little bit more space to put all the components on the main board. And usually I just start putting in a few components and then soldering all of them on the board. Observing the polarity for the capacitors, it says where it has 0 volts, but you also can see the one pin is longer than the other. The long pin is the positive side. So I will just put in a bunch of components and solder them. I don't think I have to show you how to do that. It should be well, easy to understand for everyone, I guess. So I will just be putting in these components, the resistors, the capacitors, and then the headers and the switches and encoders, and then I will solder in the whole assembly that we just made. Okay, I'll come back to you if I have all the components soldered to the board. Alright, so I already soldered a whole lot of parts, not just everything yet, because I wanted to show you something. For the audio amplifier, microphone amplifier, we're using this integrated circuit, a TL972, and this is not very available. You can find it, but it's a little bit difficult, and you might find it to have other footprints. If you can solder surface mounted devices, I also have two other footprints here on the circuit board for two different style surface mounted devices. If I ship any kit, it will probably just have the true hole mount style operational amplifier, so we will put that in. All face in the same direction, so pin 1 is at the front of the circuit board, so maybe the SMD layouts are not clear where pin 1 is, but you should be able to see it, but it's on the front end. Okay, you will notice a lot of parts are already in place. The header here is missing for the display. If I want to place the headers on the display, I usually first solder this small header. This comes from the factory pre-installed. Here is no header, but we use it to support the board. It is connected to the socket that is normally over here. We have to take out the SD card socket. We do not use it. You can simply cut it away, pry it off, whatever. If you damage the board a little bit in this area, it's no problem, but it will come off very easily. So we have to remove that. On this display I already removed that connector. Okay, I will solder in these headers first, try to make it a little bit straight. It does not need to be perfect. It's not used on any of these pins. This is only to connect the micro SD card socket, and we do not use that socket. Okay, then I'll push on the female headers, and then after it's all together I just put it on the board and try to align it. Because we have it on headers, it's easy to remove, and you can see we have quite a bit of space in between where we should put our audio board and teensy, but it does tend to be very well narrow, so you have to be sure you have a compact build. Okay, then we will solder these pins all over here. Not every pin is used, but we will solder every pin, so we have a good connection between the boards. They can hold each other very well on these header pins, so there's no problem. Okay, so I will finish up these headers, put in some switches. Let's see, I also forgot to solder this small switch. Just as well, and then I'll put in the encoders and the switches, and then it's time to put in the assembly. Okay, I think I can already show you about the microphone. This is the microphone. The small printed circuit board is the microphone, and we have a angled header for that, so we can also put that together. And it has to be kind of straight, so we might have to heat it up again and try to get it as straight as possible. It does not have to be exact, but looks a lot better like this. And these small pins have to be clipped away, so it is as flat as you can get it, because this will sit on the inside of the box. I ship my boxes, so if you got it from me, I ship them with a pre-drilled hole here in the front. The whole top section is all pre-milled, pre-drilled, but the microphone will be behind that hole, and we have to find the right position. So if we put it in, I'm gonna try to clip this a little bit shorter, and we can try and get something like a gasket in between. But if I solder that, I always just solder one pin first. So if I want to adjust it to get the hole in the right position, it's easily for me to adjust if you only have one pin soldered. So that's a trick I always use, always solder one pin first. Okay, and also using a trick like this to hold it up, so you don't need any other hands to get it in place. So afterwards we will solder all the other pins, but we just solder one for now, so we can easily adjust it to get it at the correct height, correct position behind the hole. Okay, I will finish up the last parts, and I will get back to you about the mounting of the assembly, the Teensy assembly we already made. Alright, so we have mounted most parts. And now we need to put the assembly in place. Best to have the pins as straight as possible. And there are two pins, a ground pin here and a v0.2 pin over there. You can use a header pin, try to put it in and put the teensy over it, but you do not have to do that. You can put in the pin afterwards, which makes it a lot easier. So I'm gonna try and put this one in. It's a little bit tricky, so it might take some time. Be sure not to use the last pin. The last pins are not used, so pick the one after the last pin and try to push most pins in, and adjusting the board a little bit to find the next pins to get into place. Okay, oh, once you go over there, well, like I said, it's a little bit tricky to do this, but I am sure you will manage. Maybe after failing one time and readjusting the pins, but eventually they will all find the right place. And well, yes, I made a few boards before, so when you see me doing it, it might look quite easy. Okay, so it's all mounted up in here, but we're not gonna solder all the pins. We're just gonna solder one pin to hold it all together. Just put it on somewhere so it will not fall out. Okay, I'm gonna solder one pin, does not really matter which one. Okay, so this will hold it in place. And now we will mount the screws and the spacers, so we can put it in the box and then adjust the height of the board. So the height of the board is important, so it will line up here with the audio and the USB connector, and this end at the micro SD port. So you can always file out a little bit to make the holes a little bit bigger, but I think this is a nice way to try and keep the holes just about the original size. Okay, this is the countersunk one that is put in the top. Here in the bottom we have regular pen head screws, and we'll screw them in and mount it in the case. I will be back with you when I mounted all the screws. Okay, the screws and spacers are in. I'm gonna mount the display. It's not really need it this time, but I'm gonna use it anyway. The spacers need to be adjusted a little bit. It will just fit, so try and put the flat ends next to the display like that, and then you will notice this part will stick out a little bit. This connector sticks out, so you will have to pry the board or the housing apart just a little bit to make sure it will fit. Okay, it seems it won't fit. Okay, there it is. It snaps into place. Okay, so now is a good time to get the screws mounted, or at least 2 screws mounted. We still have the protective film on, so it's a little bit hard to get that screw in. They're on the right place. Okay, so the screwdriver is a little bit too small, but it will work. And then we can see how well things line up. Might be wise to have a micro SD card already with you to be sure we are in the right place. I think the spacer is not really lined up correctly. It's a little bit hard to get the screw in. But it's going. Okay, so we have our screws mounted, and we can check how well things are lined up. I don't think you can see it on the camera, but this end of the teensy should come up a bit. So we're gonna heat up the pin so we can move it. Oh, it still is very low, so we might still need to file out this end a little bit, but maybe we can get close enough. Trying with my tweezers to adjust the thing, but it's a bit hard. Okay, already looks a bit better, but not quite in the position where I would like to see it. Okay, this was a nice try, but this is not a good video. So, okay, so I have put in all the parts, and I soldered just this one pin. And now we're gonna put in the whole assembly into the housing, so we can see how well everything matches up. We have this end which is sticking out a bit, so we have to pry open the housing a little bit, and then we can see how everything can fit. Okay, putting that over the microphone. Here the switches on this end and the rotary encoders. Okay, so that was the microphone moving by, and here we have the audio connector in place. Okay, that looks quite well. Trying to put in a few screws. We have the protective film still on the display. Oh, it's a bit hard to get that screw in place. You can see this spacer is a little bit out of alignment, but I think it will fit. I should have used a better screwdriver that will actually fit the screw, but it's going in anyway. Okay, so here it is. It's screwed in place, and we can check now how well this fits. Could have done a better job, but okay. And at this end, well, it looks like the micro SD card will fit right in. I should have thought of having one here with me. Oh, I have something here with me, so I can check if the micro SD card is has a good fit, and it just looks like it. So I think we can solder the rest of the pins right now, so we are sure we have everything in the right position, so our headphones will fit and it will be easy to put in and take out the micro SD card. Okay, so after soldering all these pins, we can cut them off, but we do have to remember also the other end of the resistors needs to be soldered, and there are 2 pins that also need to be soldered, or have to be put in. Okay, soldering all the pins would not take a very long time, although this is the ground pin, so it takes a little bit more time to heat up. Okay, the microphone pin, I'm just gonna solder them all over. Oh, that one was an empty hole, and then I need to solder that one. Okay, so these are all our pins. We can cut off the excess, and we can use these wires for a ground pin and a battery voltage pin. The battery is for the backup power for the clock to remain on time, so we do not have to set it every time we want to use the detector. Okay, some header pins. Let's take a bit more energy. Okay, and we pick up some pins from the resistors we just used, and put one in here, the ground pin. Trying to put it straight down. Maybe it's better to take out the unit and the battery voltage pin, so we can see if we put them in the right place. But if they are straight, I'm sure they are in the right position. Okay, a ground pin. So these pins are only in 2 of the boards, so not the complete stack. They are not in the audio board, they're just in the teensy and the main board. So we can see them on the other side if we take the display off. It's always a little bit tricky to get, oh, I forgot my SD card, to get past the connectors. Okay, taking off the display, and then we can see here we have one ground pin and we have the V battery voltage pin. So we solder those 2. Okay, that's one, and that's the other. Okay, so that's nicely soldered. I don't know if this is well enough focused and large enough to see, but all these resistors could use a tiny droplet of tin to be sure they are fastened like they should be. This one does not look very nice. Okay, so we solder all of them to make sure we have a good connection over there. Okay, well, that's for just about all the parts we needed to solder. We can now load the software, and we can use the device on an external power source via the micro USB connector, or we can put in a power bank. We can connect the power bank here on this small connector. It says 5 volts in, but it should be able to run from about 3.6 volts. So using a lithium battery should be enough to run the device. And maybe it would be wise to change the 4.7 ohm resistors. There's one over there and there's one over there, to 0 ohms or another very low value. So you are sure there is not a big voltage drop. These two resistors are also used to prevent some noise, digital noise or whatever, on the audio circuit or on some other circuit. So we're pretty much finished now to build the whole thing in the enclosure. The one thing we still need to do, putting in the battery the wrong way, like this, that's much better, is to make sure the height is adjusted for the microphone, kind of like in the same way as I did with the Teensy. You can see the Teensy is a little bit slanted. This end is a little bit more up on this end. You might want to watch the programming button is not pushed by the display. I'm sure it's not, because I already checked that, but it's coming quite close. So if you think it might touch that, just try to adjust the slot here by filing it out, so the SD card can be lowered a bit and it will not touch the underside of the display. Okay, so those were all these parts. It's a little bit hard to get a microphone past the housing. Might file off a little bit over there as well. Okay, so it's in there and you can see the microphone is already quite in the right direction, so it has to be moved only by a little bit, so I will do that later. Just a little bit information about the power bank that I use. The small one, it's sold as a 5,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 milliamps battery. Probably is around 4,000 or 4,400. Like I said, you do not need all of the circuit board, because it will not fit in the housing. So I first take off the battery, so I'm sure nothing bad can happen, and then we just take off this end of the circuit board, just like that. And you can see this track, I'm not sure how clear it is, but it's running over the B- contact. B- is on this one actually printed on the track. This track here running over the B- is the 5 volts output of this circuit board. So I'm gonna scratch away a little bit of the green coating, and then I can apply a droplet of tin to solder on the 5 volts output, which I can connect to my power switch. And from the power switch I will just connect to the 5 volts input over here. You cannot reach which one is 5 volts, but it's quite clear that this one is connected to the ground plane and the top one is 5 volts. Okay, well, I think you can imagine how you can place the whole thing together in the box. So I think this video is quite done for now. Okay, thank you for watching, and have fun with your bet detector. Bye bye.